Today's guest is Ambassador Larry Leon Palmer, diplomat to the United States of America. Larry Palmer served as ambassador to Honduras, a special representative to the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, ambassador to Barbados, the Dominica, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadine, Antigua and Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis. His last position was at Washington, D.C.'s Howard University as he brought his distinguished diplomatic career to increase the university's engagement in foreign services, a key leader indeed. Welcome to Simone Talks. Well, today I am honored to not only have an ambassador, but also my uncle, Ambassador Larry Palmer. Welcome to the show, Uncle Larry. Hi.
Well, good morning, good morning. My niece, my favorite niece.
Oh, I love it. I can't wait to share that with my family.
It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor. First of all, let me say thank you for this opportunity. Because as a former public servant and a career foreign service officer, I'm always just absolutely delighted to have a forum to share with other young Americans, especially Black African Americans, about some of the unique opportunities offered in public service in general and in the State Department and the Foreign Service in particular. And I'd be remiss if I did not take this opportunity to mention Howard University, where I am currently serving as ambassador in residence. And I oversee the State Department's, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit more, the department's Wrangell, Pickering, and Payne fellowship programs, in which the department provides money to minority students who are interested in studying international affairs. So I'm ever since you asked me to come on, I've been just very, very excited about this opportunity and very, very pleased.
I am more excited because I tell you, I go through, who can I get as a guest? What kind of topic can I, bring up? I'm like, oh my gosh, I can have my Uncle Larry, my own Uncle Larry, ambassador. There is so much to talk about, so much to cover in this interview, Uncle Larry. So we are going to talk about, let me ask you, what was it like the day you got the call?
That's a great question. As a Foreign Service officer, you swear in and you go through a whole career, especially when you talk about a career ambassador. You go through a career of smaller, less important jobs. I mean, my very first job in Foreign Service, I was a vice consul in the Dominican Republic, La República Dominicana. It was where I learned to speak Spanish. It was a wonderful job. I would do visa interviews up to 150 people per day, and more on Thanksgiving.
Really?
Who were interested in coming to the United States. And you had to, in a 2-minute interview, you had to make a decision as, if I give this person this visa, will he or she come back? And that was of course full of interesting experiences and war stories. But I worked up through that. I was a director of human resources in Montevideo, Uruguay. That was my second post. I came back to Washington for the third post for a year, and then out to Sierra Leone, where I was the counselor for administrative affairs, and on and on. But eventually I reached the rank of the senior foreign service, where I qualified for ambassadorial positions. And I was under consideration for ambassador to Honduras, but you never know, because it's a long and involved process in which you and your record are considered by the Secretary of State, the Deputy Secretary, and several undersecretaries. But on the day that I got the call, I'll never forget it, my son Vincent was visiting. Was Vincent in school yes. Was he in school? No, he was not in school in Ecuador. He was in school at Florida A&M, and he was visiting me, and we were on the golf course. And the driver who
That's a
kept
hole in one.
the driver who kept the cell phone came and said, Mr. Palmer, you have a phone call here. So I said, yes, this is Mr. Palmer. And it was a real icon in the State Department that you'll probably hear more about. And it was Ambassador Ruth Davis. Mm-hmm. She was a Black woman from Atlanta, went to Spelman, who was our first Black career and first female, rather, Black career ambassador. So she called me, she said, I have some good news for you. I said, yes, ma'am. She said, we would like you to serve as our ambassador to Honduras. Oh, it was elation. It was elation.
Golf cart?
It was elation. I could have thrown a golf ball the next 350. Wow.
Was that
but because it is a real moment that career ambassadors really strive for, work for. Mm-hmm. And my first words were, thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord.
Amen. So did your golf game get better after that?
Absolutely. I hardly remember hitting the balls. I hardly remember hitting because I could hardly wait to get home and share the news with the family.
I know. I remember the swearing in. We were able to come and be a part of that. I was somebody special that day. I tell you, I'm going to the swearing in of my Uncle Larry.
I certainly appreciated the family there because you can't do this job without family. You know, one thing about Foreign Service is you spend so much time out of the country, and there's so many seminal events that you miss. Yeah. You know, you miss so-and-so's wedding, or you miss when the grandmother was in hospital, or you miss this, so very many seminal events that you miss. And so you always, you really love and cherish your family. Mm-hmm. I mean, you talk about your foundation, because whether you're in Korea, or whether you're in South America, whether you're in Central America, what nails you to this country and to being an American is your family, because you're spending most of your time out there. Mm-hmm. And my family was wonderful. My dad was a minister, and my brother was a minister, and no matter that I didn't spend a lot of time in the country, I was always embraced. And and I don't mean that figuratively, I mean that literally. I was embraced and hugged every time I came home by family, which helped me really keep my head on straight. And another thing too, while I was out as Ambassador Palmer, and I would leave a particular, I would come out, the driver would have the door open, standing there waiting for me to get in.
That was my next question.
There were so many little perks and all, but when I came back home to my little churches, it was, oh, well, Larry is back. You know, how you doing, Larry? I'm doing very well, Sister Williams, you know, blah, blah, blah. And that was a wonderful, wonderful thing. It really, and you know, you kept your head kind of, if your head ever got a little bit too expanded, someone was always quickly there with the pen to deflate it.
That was going to be my next question, because I remember you telling me before about how when you're here, you're Larry Palmer, but you go to another country and you get out of the car and there's flowers thrown at your feet. And
it was a fairy tale existence for a while, but I threw it all for the years that I had executive positions. What was very important to me was remembering that ambassador was what I did. Mm-hmm. It is not who I am, who I was. Larry Palmer is who I am. Ambassador Palmer is is what I do, because I knew that one day, the day would come, as they say, as they used to sing in church, that awful day will surely come. Yes, when I was no longer going to be ambassador. Right. And at that time, I had to be Larry Palmer, and I had to be very, very comfortable with Larry Palmer. And that's where I am today. And I enjoyed the experience, relished in it, excelled at it in some points, but I did know that it was temporary. And I'm quite comfortable now with what I'm doing.
And on that note, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back with more from Ambassador Larry Palmer. Welcome back to Simone Talks. Today, I'm talking with my uncle, Ambassador Larry Palmer, and we were just sharing in our last segment all of the great experiences that he has had as ambassador, and we're going to get into some more of that good stuff. Uncle Larry, Ambassador Larry Palmer, to be proper. Tell us about what made you get into politics?
Oh, that's a very good question. As a matter of fact, it goes way back. I graduated Emory University in 1970, which means that I was a college student during some very turbulent years, 1966 to 1970. You'll recall in 1968, we had the assassination of Martin Luther King, followed closely by the assassination of Robert Kennedy. 1970, we had the murders on Kent State, the murders of students on Jackson State. We had the Vietnam War and lots of the turbulence and the protests at that time. And so I was a child of all of that. So after college, after I graduated, I had an opportunity to study for a master's degree by a Peace Corps internship program, and where I went to Liberia as a Peace Corps volunteer. So I was there in the interior of Liberia from 1970 to from 1971, let's say, through the end of 72. During that time, during the time as Peace Corps volunteer, that I got to see our embassy at work there. We had a very, very excellent embassy crew. From the ambassador right down to the embassy officers. They would come up country, taking on terrible roads and whatever to see their contacts. And if they were going through a village where they had Peace Corps or Peace Corps volunteer, they would always manage to bring something extra. I mean, ice, for example, was a luxury for us, and they would come up with a cooler absolutely packed with ice and sometimes other libations and things that we could not get. And they would sit down there and they would talk to us about what was going on in the country and so forth. And I really liked the idea of what it was that they were doing. And I said, that always stayed in the back of my mind. So eventually at some point, I'm going to take a look at perhaps a career with State Department and Foreign Service. Well, I finished Peace Corps, came back, got my master's degree, went back to Liberia to teach a little bit at a place called Cuttington College. And then I came back and finished my doctorate at Indiana University. Upon finishing that, I began to teach history at Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem. Okay. And I did that for about 3 years. And I said, I always remembered State Department and Foreign Service. So I decided to take the Foreign Service exam. At that time, the exam was given once a year on the first Saturday in November. But long story short, I passed the exam. So I swore in November of 1981 with the view of maybe staying 3 to 4 years and returning to academia. It was my early experience as a Peace Corps volunteer with the diplomats and the foreign and our embassy in Liberia in terms of what they were doing. I mean, I can tell you now, in these little third world countries, no one knows a country better than a Peace Corps volunteer. We learn those countries and know them from the bottom up. We travel to all the little towns and hamlets. But in Liberia, those embassy people knew that country almost, and the key word here is almost as well as a Peace Corps volunteer. So it was my experiences with our embassy personnel that really piqued the interest. And once I was in it, I was off and running.
And you just hit the ground running.
Absolutely.
Wow. And did you know you were in Wikipedia?
No, I've never really had the nerve quite to Google myself, knowing I've had so many experiences, and I don't know which ones that they may have chosen to put in there.
Oh, wow. Really?
Nah.
Someone called me one day and said, you know, Uncle Larry's in Wikipedia. I'm like, what? My uncle on Wikipedia page.
I hope they treated me well.
So yes, they did. They did. They did very well in it. Tell us about the places that you have traveled.
Oh my goodness. I have served in, as I said, in Dominican Republic, and from there, that was my home. But when you're there, you travel to Haiti. Met Richard Burton in Haiti, as a matter of fact. You travel from there to Jamaica, all around those little places. And then my second posting was Montevideo, Uruguay. And you're down at the very bottom of the world, I called it. But from there, I managed to travel to Chile, to Argentina, to Brazil, to Paraguay, all around those little places. And you get another view of the world from there. But let's see. So then I went, let's see, from Uruguay, from South America, I came back to Washington, then to Sierra Leone, where I went back to Liberia again, had wonderful time in Guinea, visited all around West Africa, Dakar, Senegal, Accra, Ghana. And from there I came back and spent a little time at University of Texas at El Paso. I was the assistant to the president of the university there, where I worked with the North American Free Trade Agreement. I worked with Governor Ann Richards of Texas. It was a wonderful time to spend some time there. Stayed there for 2 years. Then I went back out and went to the Far East in Korea, which gave me a chance to visit China. And I wanted to visit China. And that's something I think everybody should do in their lifetime, because the customs are so very different in the Far East. But I got to Thailand and Japan and those places. And upon finishing there, let's see, I came back to the senior seminar. Senior seminar was it's no longer in existence, but it was the State Department's highest program of leadership and management. They took just only the top 15 officers in the State Department, and they would take 15 other officers from the other agencies, from agriculture, from FBI, from commerce, from intelligence, all of that. They take 30 officers, and we would spend together a year visiting places in the United States, concentrating on domestic policy, because we would have spent 20 years on international policy. So there it was the first time to visit Alaska. What a majestic state. We had our dedicated plane to visit Alaska. I never knew that once you fly into Juneau at that time had only about 14 miles of paved road. You could not drive into and out of, I think it may even still be that way today, Juneau, Alaska. We got to visit Sitka, Alaska, a marvelous state. We visited many of our military bases here in the United States. You got to see some of our commandos at work. We got to see our FBI commandos and our naval commandos and various other things. We managed to visit some very poor communities. The poorest country in the United States at that time was located in Mississippi. And they decided to build casinos to try and combat that poverty. And then it was from there that I went out to my job as I was the DCM, the deputy chief. An embassy, you had the chief of mission, COM, and the DCM is the deputy. And I was deputy chief in Ecuador. The chief of mission was Ambassador Gwen Claire. And it was a wonderful experience. While I was there, we had a kidnapping of some 8 Americans. 1 American was eventually killed, but it went from September 2000 till February of 2001. We were negotiating and back and forth and back and forth. And eventually they made a movie based on that. It's called Proof of Life. It stars Russell Crowe and Meg Ryan. Proof of Life. And it was made there in Ecuador. A lot of it was shot at the embassy. some of the Marine security guards who were in the movie were our actual Marine security guards. I learned a lot about leadership from Ambassador Gwen Claire, and we had a number of close calls, security-wise, but I learned quite a bit about leadership in that time. And it was from there that I got the call that I had my own embassy in Honduras, the Republic of Honduras.
Yeah.
And I spent 3 wonderful years there in Tegucigalpa, the capital of Honduras.
In Honduras.
That's correct.
What was your scariest moment?
There were a number of significant moments. Probably my scariest moment, I was not ambassador, but I was in Sierra Leone. In Sierra Leone, we had a little embassy there where we had not very many people, and so we depended on the bigger embassy in Liberia. And I told you I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Liberia for the longest time, for 2 years there. This was back in 1970, 72. Now I'm in, fast forward, and I'm an officer at our embassy in Sierra Leone in 1988. So the embassy, our embassy had generally, as I said, we counted on a little plane flight. There was a C-12 plane that would fly from our embassy in Liberia to there in Sierra Leone and bring us things through the diplomatic pouch. Ammunition for our Marines to do familiarization fire, US dollars, various important documents. But the plane was out of order, and we had not been serviced for several months. We were running low in cash. We were running low in ammunition. So I said, oh, I know this country well, no problem. We will go overland. I said, I know Liberia, I know this. So I had a driver, and I had diplomatic pouches in the back, and we decided to drive. It was only a 6-hour drive to Liberia. And as we drove through the heartland of Sierra Leone, you had checkpoints. You would stop, and the Sierra Leoneans were very nice. You'd show your diplomatic passport, you had your diplomatic tag, they'd say, oh, pass, pass, pass. We came to the border with Liberia. And this was just a few months. I left actually months before the war there broke out with, it was a terrible war. But anyway, got to the border there, and we stopped because there was the bar was down, and this very irate officer, this very irate soldier emerged from the tent with an M14. I had my window down. He put the M14 directly in my face.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm telling you, Simone, I don't know what I was thinking of, but I was in God's hand, because I grabbed the barrel of the gun and I pushed it to the side. I said, excuse me, man, you're a small boy. You're a small boy. Don't you see this is a diplomatic vehicle? Give me your commanding officer right now. Right now, I want to see your commanding officer. No, he could have shot me. That barrel looked about this big.
Oh my God.
He could have just pulled the trigger and go, ba, 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 ba.
Yeah.
And he didn't know what to do. He was totally befuddled.
Caught off guard.
He went back into the building, and now he had two of them coming out. Two. And so his commanding officer got to the window, prepared to continue. He looked, he said, Mr. Palmer?
Oh.
It was one of my students that I taught as a Peace Corps volunteer in 1972, who was an Army officer.
Wow.
He said, Mr. Palmer? I said, Clarence. So I got out, we had a big hug, we jumped up and down, we went inside and had a little libation. And he said, well, where are you going? I said, I'm going to Monrovia. And in the Liberian tradition, he said, well, what you will bring for me? And then in the very Liberian tradition, I said, what you will keep for me? He said, I will keep you something. And I said, I will bring you something. That was, and sure enough, when I got my business done, I came back, I had my diplomatic pouches full with thousands, tens of thousands of US dollars. I had lots of ammunition. I had classified documents, well, not classified documents, but regular documents.
Mm-hmm.
And I stopped there because I had brought him a bottle of champagne for his wife,
Mm-hmm.
a nice bottle of good scotch for him, and I brought a couple of boxes of candy for his daughter. And there he had huge bunches of bananas. He had a bag of country rice. He had a half of a deer there.
What?
It was, yeah, half of a deer, which was wonderful. In those bushes, you know, it's hard to get good bush meat. So we exchanged our goods. We had a few more drinks. I drove back home, and it was fine. But as I was telling someone about that, they said, you know, you could have been actually killed when you grabbed that barrel and pushed it away like that. It could have come back and gone boom, 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 boom.
Mm-hmm.
But
Wow.
God was with me.
God was with
God was with me.
God was
but
with me. Gosh.
That was one moment. There were several other fairly scary moments, but there were good moments. For example, as ambassador in Honduras, actually this was after I had left. They had an election, and the newly elected president was someone that I had a wonderful relationship when I was there. And so he invited me. At that time, I was president of the Inter-American Foundation. So he invited me back to Honduras for his inauguration. But I was, as a special guest of the new president, I was invited to all of the functions. And one of the very special functions was, at that time, the Prince of Spain, Prince Carlos, very tall man. He must be 6'8", 6'9", or something. But he was the guest of honor at a luncheon. And I had the privilege of sitting next to the Prince of Spain, who is now the King of Spain. So you know, the old poetic piece about you must be able to dine with kings and not lose walk with kings and not lose the common touch. I was fortunate enough to walk with kings, and of course, now as a former diplomat, I have nothing but the common touch.
Well, I know that you shared with us that you were also ambassador of Barbados.
Oh yes, absolutely. I had a marvelous time there.
Someone very special there.
Thank you for that. Yeah, as a matter of fact, that was one of my most memorable experiences. That's true. I was appointed in 2012 as ambassador to Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean. That's Barbados, St. Kitts, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Antigua, Grenada, and Dominica. So I was responsible for 7 countries, 7 different prime ministers, 7 different parliaments, 7 different bilateral agendas, and 1 huge multilateral agenda. But I really enjoyed it. It was a wonderful time. But during that time, as you know, we have a very famous diva, and that's all I can call her, a diva.
That's right.
And Rihanna is from Barbados. She's a wonderful, wonderful, and I think she has a product line now called Fenty, because she was born Robin Fenty. Robin Fenty, and of course now she's Rihanna. But I met her aunt, at a social engagement there, and we became quite good friends. And so it was her aunt then who introduced me to Rihanna's mother, and we would see each other on the social things or at receptions. I would invite them to receptions, and they would come to the receptions. And so one day I got a call from her aunt, and she said, "Ambassador, Robin will be here this weekend, and we're going to do a little thing for her at the house." Just family, and we'd like you to come. I was delighted. I was delighted. I said, yes, I'll be there. I'll be there. So sure enough, I came at the appointed moment, and Rihanna had not yet arrived. I started to get up to go for when the buffet. They said, "Oh no! Just tell them what you'd like." And you know, they called over one of the kids, a 12-year-old, and said, "Look, go get the ambassador some food. Yes, yes, ma'am. And sure enough, a few minutes later, Rihanna arrived.
Oh my.
And she didn't have a big entourage. She had a very good friend of hers, and she had a guy with the camera. And so I got up to maybe go. They said, "Oh no, Ambassador, no, she will come." And sure enough, she can't. She knows you're here. You come. And so she came over and she said, "Ambassador, it's a pleasure meeting you." I said, "No, the pleasure's mine. All mine meeting you." She just, she seemed so much smaller in real life.
You're finding one, yeah.
But she was a wonderful niece. Speaking of wonderful nieces, she just so respectful of her mother, of her aunts. But there was none of this. I'm a diva. I'm whatever. She was niece Robin at home. I was ultra impressed with that. I was ultra impressed. One of the most recognized people in the world.
Yeah.
And yet she was there with the family. And so I thanked her aunt profusely for that invitation.
Yeah. We're going to take another break, Uncle Larry. I'm sorry, Ambassador Palmer. And we'll be right back with more on Simone Talks. Don't go away.
Excellent.
To see more episodes of the Simone Talks show, make sure you subscribe, click on the notification bell, and don't forget to leave a comment. Welcome back to Simone Talks. Today we're speaking with Ambassador Larry Palmer, and oh my gosh, the stories that we've heard, it is just so much great information and so much to learn about the position as ambassador, as diplomat, and the experiences, the places that he has gone. And I'm just so, I could just take this interview into days. There's so much to share. But I do want to ask, Ambassador, what was the most difficult thing that you had to do as ambassador?
That's an excellent question, because as ambassador there, you are the president's representative, you're the president's chief representative abroad, and you have a number of things, and you take the oath of honor to serve, not the administration, but to serve your government and the Constitution. But I had a couple of difficult things, but one of the most difficult was back in 2003. I received a call from the chief of staff of the President George Bush. And of course I hurried to the phone. I said, yes, this is Ambassador Palmer. I said, Ambassador Palmer, the president has decided to send troops into Iraq. This was during the Saddam Hussein administration. And he said, and we need assistance from our allies. He would like you to go to your president, the president of your country, and convince him to join the coalition of the willing and to send troops to join us as we go into Iraq's reconstruction.
Wow.
I said, I beg you, would you say that again? And he did. To go to your president and get him to join the coalition of the willing and to send troops with us into Iraq. Now, in foreign service, there's always, from the day you join, you have the option. If indeed there is something that you are asked to do for a country officially, if you cannot do it in good conscience, you cannot do it. You can resign without prejudice at the same moment. You can resign. You go in, you clean out your drawers, you leave the embassy, and there is no prejudice to your employment record.
Wow.
Now, for me, this was a very difficult thing to do in terms of, because there was Iraq at that time. There was so much controversy.
Yeah.
But I have worked under so many presidents. I've worked under Reagan, Bush 1, Bush 2. This was under Clinton, and eventually under Obama. But I talked for a long time, because we, as Foreign Service, we had a number of our Foreign Service officers resign because they could not in good conscience agree with our going into Iraq. But I gave it quite a bit of thought, and I decided I would do as asked. So I called the president of Honduras and made an appointment with him. And when I sat down, he said, "Well, Larry, how can I help you?" And I went into what I wanted him to do. He said, "Wait, are you kidding?" He says, "I don't have enough political capital to do that. Don't you know that this country and the feeling out there is just very, very anti to this? How can I do?" And I said, "Wait." And before he would that, I would say, "Wait," before he would say no. After 3 days of negotiations, 3 days, he said to me, he said, "Well, I'd like to speak to the Secretary of State," who at that time was General Colin Powell. And he said, "Can you get me an appointment with the Secretary of State?" I said, "Let me see." So I called Washington to the Operations Center and said, "I need to speak with the Secretary." The Secretary Powell had earlier visited Honduras, so I knew him very well. He was aware of the president. We asked him about, I explained to him what was going on. He says, "Fine, bring him up." So we brought up the president there. President of Honduras met with Secretary of State, and while I was pretty convincing, Secretary of State Colin Powell was very convincing. He came back, he agreed to join the Coalition of the Willing, and they sent 370 troops to Iraq for to help in the rebuilding program. The Peace Corps volunteers wanted to join, and I said they were that can we join these marches? And I love the Peace Corps volunteers. I was a return volunteer, spent 2 wonderful years there, but my answer was absolutely not. You cannot join anti-American marches when you are here representing the U.S. government. And it would cause quite a bit of but what I judged it is that they needed a place to vent. They weren't happy. The volunteers would come out of the villages and all. We'd have 50 or 100 volunteers, and they would vent. Why? What makes us the police of the world? What makes us this? What makes us that? And I would let them vent, and they saw me as the representative of government, and I had to take it pretty young. But then my question to them was, and everyone, I said, think a minute. You are the president of the United States right now. You are responsible for the security of 250 million people. And your intel tells you that there is a possibility of weapons of mass destruction in this country. And they have a loose cannon leader. You are responsible for the security of 250 million people. What are you going to do? Oof. Are you going to wait and say, "Well, I sure hope my intel people were wrong"?
Wow.
Are you going to say, "Well, you're going to wait until there's the first dirty bomb"? Are you going to just cross your fingers and say, "I hope it's not true"? There's an action that must be taken. What have we done out there that would inspire that many people to want to harm Americans?
People, yeah.
And I thought about that.
We think, 1 or 2 persons or maybe a dozen who we see on TV who have done this suicide bombing, but
he said there are 100, and sure enough, there are so many waiting to, and I said, and that made me think. That made me really think out there. But my proudest moment is that through it all, I think for me, becoming the punching bag and absorbing most of their vitriol, I didn't have to send 1 Peace Corps volunteer home for joining these demonstrations.
And that's leadership.
Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah. Tell me, how was it serving under Obama, President Obama?
It was marvelous. It was marvelous. We had an administration that was tremendously supportive with President Obama as the president, Secretary Clinton when I went in, and what was very amazing was I was ambassador to Barbados in the Eastern Caribbean, and you had 7 prime ministers, all Afro descendants, and who were all immensely proud of our first Black president. And I was the representative of this first Black president. And so it made it tremendously easy. Sometimes as a diplomat, as an ambassador, it's hard to get an appointment with some of these prime ministers. You ask for an appointment, they can put you off for 2 weeks at a time or a week or whatever. But when Ambassador Palmer called and asked for an appointment, you know, they were quickly forthcoming, because many of them wanted to do was talk about President Obama. Well, tell me about the president. You know, what's he doing? How's he doing here? Can you get him to answer? If I was asked once, I was asked so many times, can you get him to come and visit the Caribbean? And I did. From the day one, I tried to get him. And finally I heard, Ambassador, the president is planning a trip to the Caribbean.
Wow.
And so it was whether it was going to be Jamaica or Barbados. We fought and we tried and we prepared this paper and that paper, but in the end we lost out to Jamaica.
To Jamaica.
And I think that's because President Obama was a fan of the music, the reggae
dancer,
because I understand one of the first things he did upon arriving was go to the Bob Marley Museum.
Which is not a bad stop there.
That's a good But stop. All that to say is that just the fact of having President Obama, the president, made my job a lot easier. For example, when I got there, before I went out, the Secretary of State was saying, Mr. Palmer, you're going to be ambassador accredited to 7 countries. And each of those countries have a vote in the United Nations. The United States has 1 vote. Your countries have 7 votes. And right now, most of them vote with us in the United States on our resolutions and so forth. Your responsibility is to keep those countries voting with us. Yes, ma'am. Now, but it was very difficult, though. For example, now, many of the countries have no oil supply. And where were they getting their oil from? Venezuela. And what they were getting at very cheap rates. Hugo Chavez was advancing them oil very cheaply. For what? For their votes, for their support. And so now I have to go to the prime minister who's getting cheap oil from Venezuela. And I have to tell him I need you to vote with us on certain resolutions. And I hear about the oil. I said, well, we have 87 Peace Corps volunteers there. We're financing your educational system. We are putting money into sustainable development. This is, we're putting money into projects in economic development. We're helping you build your democratic institutions. We're financing the development, the support of human rights, all of these things, but they don't equal oil. And so, but most of the time, I managed to deliver the votes. We would have called it démarche. I would go in and we could deliver them voting with us. At best, I would get them to abstain on certain issues. But that was a difficulty. It wasn't easy because these are countries that are very small, but they're very independent, very, very independent.
Wow.
Oh, but in terms of Obama, one of the things I remember particularly, President Obama normalized relationship with Cuba. The whole time we could not consort with a Cuban in any way. If we talked to a Cuban, we had to report that to our regional security officer because it was a proscribed country. Upon normalizing the relationships, I could then invite the Cuban ambassador to the U.S. resident, to the American ambassador's residence. And I did. And he came.
Wow.
It was the first time in almost 60 years, Cuban ambassador had visited the American ambassador's residence, that we could shake hands in public and not create a scene. It was wonderful. All of it, each of my 7 prime ministers, once that happened, they would call me individually to send congratulations to President Obama for accomplishing this very, very difficult feat. Normalizing relationships between the U.S. and Cuba. That was amazing. I'll never forget that day.
Yeah. What was it like the day you actually met him?
He's big now. Where Rihanna was smaller than life, Obama was bigger than life.
Yeah.
He could have been a basketball player. I mean, he was a man who could walk into a room and the room would just light up. He had tremendous charisma. Tremendous charisma. He came to Ecuador as ex-president. The plane got in very late. It's supposed to get in about midnight. I was there at the airport waiting. It was late. They got in about 5 o'clock that morning. I was there. The very first thing he said to me after he said, "Oh, you didn't have to do this." He said, "You shouldn't have been here for this." You know, that was not, I said, "Oh, Mr. President, I wouldn't be in it. There's nowhere else I would rather be."
Absolutely.
And so we took him to his hotel. He decided he didn't want to sleep at all. He changed into a jogging suit and go out and go running. He had a crowd of hundreds of people behind him.
I would imagine so.
The papers read the next day that he could run for president of Ecuador. But he was an amazing personality. And I only got to, like I said, I didn't get a chance to spend lots of time with President Obama. This was like just a meeting there quickly as he was greeting all of our ambassadors. But he made you feel in that little 30 to 40 seconds that you had, he made you feel as if you were the only person in the world.
Isn't that awesome?
Only person in the world. My only regret was that the First Lady was not there with him at the time. I would have loved to have met her.
I was going to ask you that.
I did not.
Get the chance to meet the kids. Did you get the chance to meet Bo?
But no, in terms of Obama, it was a pleasure. It was truly a pleasure. I don't know if any other diplomats will have that opportunity of working with the Black president in the foreseeable future. In the foreseeable future. I will say this time, I'm certainly jealous now of some of the diplomats out. They will have an opportunity to work with Vice President Kamala Harris.
No, yeah.
But she is a Howard Bison. So I can hardly wait until she is well ensconced, and then we will again invite her to campus. And I'll get to see her and work with her as a bison rather than
you never know. They may pick up that call and their phone and say, Ambassador Palmer, we have a position for you.
If nominated, I will run. If elected, I will serve.
And if you do, I will serve as your personal assistant.
Excellent. I'll tell them I have this wonderful office management specialist.
That's right. That's what I do. That's some good stuff there, Uncle Larry. You are just so awesome.
No, I let me tell you, I spent 39 years in government service, 2 years Peace Corps, 37 as a State Department, and I tell people I really, really enjoyed it. I said, and I quote one of my old ambassadors that. Apart from being born absolutely filthy, stinking rich, being a Foreign Service officer is the next best thing.
That's awesome.
So no, I tell these youngsters who are going out, and I've mentored so many, I said I would change seats with you tomorrow to start it all over again.
Yeah,
I've had a wonderful, wonderful experience.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take another quick break, and we'll be right back with more with Ambassador Larry Palmer right here on Simone Talks.
To see more episodes of the Simone Talks show, make sure you subscribe, click on the notification bell, and don't forget to leave a comment.
Welcome back to Simone Talks. Today we are speaking with Ambassador Larry Palmer about his experiences, about his life, his places where he served as ambassador. And I'm so honored about that. As a matter of fact, I'm honored that he is my uncle as well. Yay! So, Ambassador Palmer, please share with us where you're from, some of your background, your history.
Okay, I was born in Augusta, Georgia,
Mm-hmm.
like your father.
Yeah.
Your father, her father was my oldest brother. My oldest brother, an ordained minister, pastor of a church for many years. So I'm sure, niece Simone, you spent many hours in church, did you not?
Yes, I did from birth.
I tell people if I had $1 for every hour I spent in church,
I'd be rich.
a wealthy man today.
I'd be a wealthy woman.
Absolutely. But no, I was born in Augusta, Georgia. My father was a minister. My mother was a teacher. Graduated high school in Augusta, T.W. Josie High School. It was the very first class. I was fortunate enough to be the valedictorian of that class. That's a long story too, but I won't go into. They talk about schools being separate but equal. Our school was separate and equal because we had wonderful teachers. We had a U.S. ambassador. We had a doctor and a teacher at the University of Georgia. We had a captain in the Navy. We have a person on the Supreme Court in Georgia. We had tremendous achievers from these all-Black schools, and because our teachers went to our churches, you dared not misbehave.
Yeah.
Because teacher so and so would share that with Reverend Palmer.
Mm-hmm.
And there would be consequences.
That's a tough household. Your father is a pastor, your mom is a teacher. Yeah, no wonder all of you all were smart and well behaved.
I'm sure you have many of the same memories.
Oh my gosh, yes I do.
Where you dared not misbehave.
Yeah.
Because it would go right to the pastor. But anyway, I enjoyed Augusta, Georgia. And then I left. I went to Emory University, studied there for 4 years, and joined Peace Corps, where I had some tremendous experience. But as I said, it was the very first class from T.W. Josie. We still meet on a monthly basis, our class, our alumni class. We meet on a monthly basis, and our motto is first class.
Yeah,
first
I like
class.
that. Yeah. Well, there's one. I know we talked about places you've been and family, and there's two things I want to ask you about.
Mm-hmm.
One was, did you ever meet James Brown, because y'all were in the same neighborhood and Daddy went to school with him? And did you ever meet James Brown?
Good God. James Brown came to our school once. We would have what we call assembly programs, where you go to the gym and there would be chairs on the floor and others. And James Brown was Augusta's own. He was a legend. I tell people that we did pretty well. James Brown, and of course, for those who love gospel music, the Swanee Quintet. Oh, absolutely.
Music I used to play on the air. Oh my God.
The Augusta's own Swanee Quintet.
Yeah.
And we have stories about them too. But James Brown would come back. He was very respectful to the principals. I don't know if he was very generous with his money or anything, but he would I saw him from afar on chapel program when he was there. I never really got to meet him up close and personal. Okay. Of course, if I had $750 and I paid to go to the Bell Auditorium, I could see him quite.
Right.
There's a story about James Brown that involves your grandfather. My dad, one of my dad's closest friends was a guy named Reverend Anderson, Reverend W.C. Anderson. And in those days, shoes and clothes were very difficult, very difficult. And so Reverend Anderson had bought some brand new Stacy Adams, patent leather shoes. And one day he woke up, his shoes had been stolen. Someone stole his shoes. So he called the police, they reported it and so forth. And he was with my dad when the police called him and said, we have this person down in jail here, and we need you to come identify him. And so and press charges. And I think he was in possession of your shoes. They went down, and there in jail was James Brown, a young James Brown. Now, when they made the movie Get On Up, started with another Bison, Chadwick, the late Chadwick Boseman. They made a reference to him being jailed for stealing a suit, right?
It was shoes.
It was shoes. And so they said, well, now, Reverend, you want to press charges? And of course, my dad and Reverend Anderson, in the true Black minister tradition, said, young man, we want you to be able to do something with your life, blah, blah, blah. We're not going to press charges on you. So they did not press charges. They got the shoes back, and James Brown was freed.
James Brown stole my granddaddy's shoes.
No, not your granddad. Your granddaddy's friends.
Granddaddy got him off for stealing a pair of shoes.
We got him off for stealing. That's
wow.
It. Yes, you did. Yes, we did.
That is so awesome. The other question I wanted to talk about is your trip to Africa. And you bringing back a young girl who is now my aunt, Sebu Miyaka.
Yes. As I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Africa, when I was Peace Corps, I got there. Yep, John Minyonga, the young man who came, and he came to work for me. He handled the cooking, because sometimes we had electricity, sometimes we didn't. Sometimes we had to cook on a 3-stone fire, and John was quite good at that. So he took very good care of me. John was born very, very deep in the village. He was a Bassa, and he spoke Bassa. So he decided to take me to the village once with him. In order to do that, we drove all day long. We were in a car. We had drove all day long, and we slept overnight at this village. Got up at 5 o'clock in the morning and started walking into the forest. It was pristine, beautiful forest. We had a huge waterfall that we just got in, and you could hear the waterfall from miles away, really, and that was beautiful. But we went through the waterfall under this triple growth canopy, and at the end of the day, we got to the village where John was born. We stayed there in the village 3 or 4 days, and there was these youngsters that were quite active, and one was just super curious. A young lady, she must have been about 4 or 5, but just super curious, wanted to be around everything that was going on. We'd be talking, and even though this person, I'm sure she didn't understand the word, you look, and there she was, and had a catwalk. You would never hear her coming. And so as we were about to getting ready to leave after spending a week there, John says, why don't we take one of the kids back to live with us? And that way that kid could go to school and whatever, and have a better future. And I said, yeah, that's a great idea. And so I said, what about her? He said, oh, no. She's a girl. She's a girl. No. We take a boy. We take a boy. I said, no, John, we're gonna take this person. He disagreed at first. I said, but when he saw that I was serious, said, okay. And so then there was this whole ceremony with rice and the chalk, and I have pictures of the ceremony, black and white pictures of what she was being presented to us to educate. That was the whole thing. It was the intention was to bring her out back to Bomi Hills, where she could go to school and at least start on her education. There was no intention to bring her to the United States. But she was wonderful, and her personality grew on everyone. So when I came back briefly to the United States for a visit, I was explaining it to my mother. She says, she said, why don't you bring her here to visit a bit and let her stay here and get educated here, and we'll see how it goes from there. And sure enough, I went to the embassy, and I had to get a Liberian passport and then a visa to the United States, a legal visa.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, when I came back, I brought Sable with me with the intention of her staying for getting the visa extension and maybe staying for a year or so until her English was really good, and then going back.
Mm-hmm.
But again, she was so captivating in her personality, and my mother and dad just fell absolutely in love. So I went back to the embassy to normalize her being here permanently.
Wow.
And so they eventually adopted her legally.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see, that was 72. And now 50 years later, she's still here. She was hired by the Board of Education in Richmond County. That's it, in Richmond County, and has just recently retired.
Yep.
But she's probably working more now as a retiree because she's substitute. She's doing substitute teaching and working 3 or 4 days a week. She has a little business that she has begun, and I'm telling you, she has been a real blessing to this family.
And her name is Sebu Miyanga Palmer.
That is exactly right. Sebu Miyanga Palmer. That's right. You hit that Miyanga. You hit that Miyanga just right.
Miyanga Palmer.
Miyanga,
So
exactly.
John was her father.
No, John was her brother.
Her brother.
Brother, yes.
Okay.
The old man had children. The old man had children up until he was 81. Oh, 81, yes.
All right. All right.
So when I met Sebo, I was around 22. John was a year older, 23, and Sebo was about 5.
Yeah.
And she was still not the youngest.
Yeah.
So the old man over a lifetime must have had 15 or 20 children.
Oof.
Yeah.
Good grief. Wow. Uncle Larry.
Oh, but I have more. Next time we'll meet again, I'll have stories again about the village and the trip there and the bees and honey and so many things.
I would love to do a second episode.
Well, I have certainly enjoyed. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you.
It's been a while. You know, you've given an old diplomat and an old professor a chance to relive the days of yesterday.
Oh, just a few of them, because there's so much more. I have, like I said, I have a whole pack of questions that we couldn't even cover in the time that we've been talking. But yes, I will definitely have you back on the show to delve into more of those situations and experiences.
Excellent. I understand you also do productions. So if you ever have a production that needs a gray-haired gentleman who probably smokes a pipe, wears overalls, or whatever,
I'll write you in.
I have a few credits from way back.
Yes, those are other things that we haven't been able to cover. So yes, we'll definitely do a second part to this.
That's right. Theatrical credits. That's it. While I was at Emory, I was a member of the Embassy Players.
Oh my goodness, Uncle Larry, there's so much, and there's a lot that I learned that I didn't know, and gosh, there's just so much more. I'm just so thankful that you thought it not robbery just to spend a little time with your favorite niece. Sorry, Rihanna. Absolutely. But we will we'll have you back on the show. Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. God bless you.
As excited as I was, and I looked forward to a second interview with Uncle Larry, Ambassador Larry Leon Palmer took his rest on April 21st, 2021. Rest in power. If you have a show idea or want to be a guest on the show, go to SimoneWalker.com and fill out the show form. To become a Simone Talk Show sponsor, give us a call at 240-463-2274. To see more episodes of the Simone Talk Show, make sure you subscribe, click on the notification bell, and don't forget to leave a comment.